All right, so we get into it. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this online GrainCorp webinar on summer strategies for feeding and cow body condition. I'm Glenn McFarlane, Technical Support Manager for GrainCorp. Today we will also have Laura Patty from PGG Wrightsons and Ken Winter from GrainCorp who will also join me. But before we get into them, I just want to start with, this is an interactive webinar and we do encourage you to be able to ask questions of us. So there's a Q&A functionality down the bottom, so please do that and I will present the questions to the who's talking at the particular time and who's best to answer that question. We will also be recording this webinar, so at a later stage, if more questions come up, please feel free to contact us directly. So I guess with that, with no further ado, I will introduce Laura. Laura.
Awesome. Hi, team. Thanks for jumping on for another webinar online. For those jumping onto the first one, we covered a lot around sort of gut fill and what drives dry matter intake. So we'll touch on a couple of little things like that today, just as a refresher, but big focus on some strategies around summer feeding, where certain feeds fit in, and also our main sort of focus at the moment around body condition. Cool. So our priorities and aims at the moment, we really need to start really focusing on cow condition, especially up north. So the North Island, we're going to be calving a little bit earlier in a lot of areas, and that really needs to be a big strategy now around how we're going to pre-plan that. Down south, there's probably a little bit more time up our sleeve, but still at the same time, the more we can forward plan these things, the better our outcomes for next season. We've got to be mindful of our pasture covers, so where we want to build up for winter and our winter feed and what our strategy is around that. So differing farm systems. Again, this presentation is going to be covering across New Zealand, so I'll try and keep it relevant to North and South Island, but in the south a lot more sort of winter feed growing in the form of crops, but up north a lot more grass wintering, so we've got to make sure we have those covers on board. And then where we can, we either want to maintain our production or if possible, sometimes in the autumn, slightly lift our production as well. And with our awesome payout at the moment, production is a big focus, but hopefully can just bring back the importance around that body condition, and that doesn't get neglected in a year like this as well, and that we're not just pumping just milk. So looking at our overall farm system. Why does body condition score matter? So it's all around a lot of the research. It's not just a feel-good thing, hey, I want my girl at a 5, it looks nice in the paddock. It's more to do with farm productivity, and animal health and efficiency. So when it comes to animal health, those target condition scores are calving at a 5 for mixed age girls, and those first and second calvers at a 5.5. We're getting an improvement or reduction in uterine infections, less metabolic issues, better production out of them, and also better reproduction. So that any stress period where they don't cycle between calving to mating is shorter for girls that are at their target condition score, and conception rates are also higher. So overall, it's more than one benefit, and really just trying to stress to home there just how important it is to your overall farm system. What is our targets? So I touched on just before, so those mixed age girls at a 5 and the first and second calvers at a 5.5. We want no more, so your average might be 5, but we may have a really big range in a herd. Then we've really got to sort out that range as well, so whether that's too many below or even too many above. So we want no more than 15% of the herd above or below those targets, and then we've got a nice sort of uniform herd. When it comes to production, so why don't we go heavier? That is when we do get a bigger reduction in dry matter intake post-calving for girls that are too heavy, so above these targets. Then we can get ourselves into too much fat mobilisation at calving time, actually get a bit of a decrease in production and a negative impact on our repro, because we get a lot more ketosis post-calving. So, and why would we not want to be lower than this? That really is around that production side of things and maximising milk. Now, when we do have a herd bang on target, just remember that we've primed them to be ready to produce, to fire for us essentially, and that's why if we don't then feed for that animal and prep that animal around that transition time is really important as well. So a lot of feedback you get is, don't want my girls at a 5, or if I do, I run into more problems. We've just got to get a big farm approach here, because that cow will produce better milk for you. and be a more efficient animal for you. Consider at the moment, so DairyNZ runs the body condition scoring certified assessor program and gets a whole lot of people certified. Consider getting an independent person to come in. When we see the cows every day, it can be hard at times to be honest with ourselves around where they're actually at. And this is a really handy one where you get a big graph, and we talked about those percentages above and below, and you will get that information from that graph. And you can also look year on year and build that farm history for yourself as well. So we're not going to run into how to condition score as such. There is a cool little booklet with DairyNZ, but we've got 8 key points on the animal, with really handy ones really being the hip, rump, and the pin bones out the back. We can also look at short ribs, long ribs, backbone, and thighs. So that booklet, if you don't have it, most of you would have seen it. Super handy one. I often even just walk around in the paddock with it as well. Cool. So again, looking from the rear, the tail, head, fold, and the pins are really important ones that you will see. So why body condition score and not weight? Essentially, we have a lot of range in a herd in regards to what their genetic potential of their live weight should be. We also have a lot of variation in regards to gut fill. So those paddocks I've been in, and you can imagine how much feed's sitting in the tummy, will vary each time of the day when they've had a break and just what feed you're feeding. And also things like pregnancy. So condition really is about that layer of squishiness on her, which means that we can then get an idea of what sort of reserves and where she's at. So it's a better indicator than live weight on her performance and her health. Cool. So body condition score loss, why might that be happening at the moment? At the moment, there was a graph before I showed you a bit of a W. It's quite common in New Zealand. So we lose some condition after calving. We might gain a little bit around that Christmas time. And then as we get heat stress, either a feed shortage, or even sometimes after the rains that we've had, we get really lush autumn grass come through, we get another weight loss. And then before we then pick up again pre-calving, it's quite common in a pastoral system in New Zealand to get that slight W shape in your herd over the season. So there'll be some areas with a genuine feed shortage at the moment. Even despite the rain that's been around, it takes a while for us to try and obviously grow that pasture back. But often there's a lot less in the paddock than you think when we've had a lot of the older pasture and dead matter dying away. We don't quite have the thickness of the sward. So yes, by plate meter or by height, we may think we have a certain amount. The girls don't quite fire as much as we want. Heat stress is huge. The effects that all this humidity's had will be massive on these girls in regards to rumen function, dry matter intakes. They want to eat less fibre when they eat fibre, so that's your pasture and your summer pasture and things. And even down south, your summer pasture will still have more fibre in it than your spring pasture. It makes heat when they break that down, and they don't want to feel any hotter. The big blessing you have down south is your cooler evenings, so a cow can dump a lot of its heat in the evening. If it gets lower, we really want that, definitely below 16, if not lower at night, for them to really dump their heat properly. But up north, we've had 20, 24 degree nights. Those girls are definitely struggling even more. Poor feed quality. So in the table here on the slide, highlighted in yellow the NDF. So this was a January sample, so a relevant sample just recently. And we've got 52% NDF. We can also see down there that ME, is 9.7. Protein's actually looking really good, but that physical fill or that digestibility of that pasture is a lot lower. So this takes a lot of effort to break down those bricks and cement that are in there for the cow to be able to get what it needs out of it. But also around that physical fill side of things, it's not going to be able to fit as much in. That's around probably more on a feed shortage and then poorer feed quality. But now we will be heading into also a time, depending on how the weather goes, where we can get some great feed quality, and then we still get condition score loss. So why is this happening? This can be actually that we're driving production. So we've got some nice grass with good protein in it. We're now getting them to eat more because the NDF figure in this picture is reduced. So now they can actually fit more in, digest it faster. We push production, lifts a little bit, but then that next level of intake to gain condition isn't always there. So we get another little bit of loss as well. We've always got things around weather and events and all of those that are going to impact our intakes as well, team. Cool. So what strategies do we have to improve our body condition score? Well, we can increase the feed offered. So whether that's more forages, on-farm supplementary feed, or whether that's buying in feed. But we can obviously put more energy in, essentially. We can try and maximise those dry matter intakes. So in a scenario where we actually have plenty of, say, pasture on farm, but the quality isn't there, then we're not maximising our dry matter intake. So we may need certain types of supplement that help to drive that intake and help to maximise how much feed they can get in. So a little bit of our sand around our big rocks, we're just trying to find little holes that we can fill to get her to eat the most she possibly can. We can reduce demand, so that's our decreased milking frequency. We can cull cows that poor producers or empty, so we've got more feed for those that are producing milk on farm. And we can do selective early dry off. So again, girls that aren't producing well, actually sometimes it is even some of our better condition score girls that might not be producing much milk, they can go on to some maintenance, clean up some paddocks for you, but you've got some better quality tucker left for your milkers. Animal health not to be forgotten, so trace mineral status, anything that can impact their animal health, as well as possibly looking at things like a strategic drench for younger cows or for lighter cows. So often we don't want to, as a general rule, blanket drench a whole herd from managing our parasite load. Often if a cow is at her optimum body condition score, she's milking well, she's doing everything well, there's no need to get rid of her worms. If she's not performing as well, and we want to give her every chance, that may be a burden for her, because any animal that's under stress, their immune system doesn't work as well. So if she has been lighter or she's young, then yeah, strategic drench there can be part of your entire program. Farms that'll do well at improving condition score will do lots of these little things. So it's not just one of them, hey, I'm going to just put more food in. They'll look at the whole herd and put a mixture of these in. So what we came for is around feeding. So some of our feeding options. That's a little bit of the behind the scenes and the why I myself will get quite passionate about body condition score and going on farm. So we've got feeding for condition gain. To break it down in a slightly more simple way, protein often is our go button for production. So when we're putting in really good quality proteins, we're going to hopefully try and pump some more milk going through. And we've got to have a balance between our protein and our energy. So any food gives energy, whether that's a fiber source can give energy, protein can give energy, and carbohydrates can give energy. It's the type and where that's used in the body that we can use to our advantage as to how we get the cow to use the energy, essentially. So different feeds have different effects on the amount of body condition score gain. So at times, if we put a really high protein diet in and souped it up with a high energy, high digestible feed, we can get quite a bit of production. But then we may actually want to just keep that protein at a nicer level and look at some lower protein feeds. Like, so up north, it's more our maize silage type stuff, or down south, it's a lot more of your grain type products or starch products. And that can help drive some of that body condition score gain. Again, down south, sometimes some lifted beet or grazing fodder beet on the milking platform is another really good lower protein energy source. So we keep it just right that she produces where we want her to, but we're also getting the gain as well. Really keeping in mind that not only when production lifts, so we might do some maths and go, she's currently producing this and I want her to gain this, so I'm going to feed her. And then her production lifts. So we've got to feed her again to get our gain, and that's sometimes the step we miss, and we've got to make sure we're really understanding her requirements. At the end of the day, the cow doesn't lie to us, so if she's not doing what we want, we need to rethink how we've approached it, and I myself will relook at, exactly what the thought pattern's been and why might that not be happening the way it should have. Couple of slides here just as a refresher from the last talk that we had and why we're talking about this NDF and fill and dry matter intake. So essentially the lower the NDF, this was a leafy turnip crop here. Why would we grow that in summer up north? It's all to do with pasture quality. So this here has lower NDF, we can fit more food in. We can fit more food in, we can do better production, and we've got more energy in. So the higher the NDF, then the lower the digestibility and the lower our intakes essentially. This is where supplementary feed has a role to play. What does that mean in the real world? So cows will eat depending on their capacity, but 1.2 to 1.4% of live weight in fibre, so an NDF. As a rule, our New Zealand cows can get up to more around that 1.4 grazing. What does that mean? So if we have our nice spring pasture at 35% NDF, yeah, we can get those, maximise those intakes that we talk about. But if we have that summer pasture that goes to 45, and again, this can happen in nice green looking grass that's had a bit of heat stress on it, you can still have this wall happen. So this is as relevant down south as it is up north at times, because we're still getting our drop in production. Then we can see that, yeah, we might even have a 5 kilo, 4.5 kilo difference in dry matter in her maximum intake that she can get in. So we're wanting to get more in overall, and where we go. That previous example that I showed you was at 52. So, you know, that farm will have an even lower amount that we can theoretically try and squeeze in of 100% pasture diet. So this rule works for forage, okay? So when we chuck in something like palm kernel that's got a really high NDF, it's not a forage, it'll work in a slightly different way due to particle size. So questions around that, just let us know, but that's sort of how that one works. So working out requirements, we're not going to go through all these numbers in detail, but I wanted to show you where I'm going to get them from when we do an example. So the Dairy NZ Facts and Figures book is a really nice place to start to do some back of the envelope type maths, and just see if you're in the ballpark. So feel free to use that and have a look at that resource. So we're going to be using some nice just industry standard numbers to get an idea of how things fit on farm. There is fancier software, so GrainCorp and myself, we use things like Diet Check, and sort of other companies like Nutritech. So we use the software that we can plug in and get a lot more info out of around that balance of nutrients and what that means to optimize production. But in regards to what we're trying to aim to get down here, this is an awesome place to get going on. So we've got to think about maintenance, we've got to think about her production, how much she walks, what our live weight change is going to be, and pregnancy as well. Cool. Cows have certain requirements, so it's not just, again, ME, it's all around the nutrients as well in that diet. So crude protein will always be a bit of a range, and this is because quite commonly down south, there'll be a lot of ewes still probably achieving around 1.8 kilos of milk solids a day, and that's due to your pasture quality. Higher production, the more protein we're going to be needing. Up north, we may only have, we've got herds where I've been out to lately, anywhere from 1 to 1.4 kilos of milk solids. You know, there might be slightly lower requirement for protein there to maintain that production. That NDF minimum, yeah, we're going to struggle at this time of the year possibly to get there, but that is what we need for a healthy rumen. So our diets may be higher, but that's that dry matter intake challenge that we have. And then the starch side of things, yes, whilst there's recommendations and diets out there, I don't get as caught. It's an opportunity to add more starch. A lot of diets will be lower than this and doing a really good job. So it's not a target. I don't like it when this is a target. It's more a shivers, we don't want to go much higher because we're really going to have a challenge of acidosis on our hands. So we've got to look at the whole diet, but there is an opportunity to lift starch to drive milk volume. And then we've got condition gain as well. Cool. Utilisation is the next piece of the puzzle before our example around what this will, why something might not happen in the way we think on farm. So I've written it all on paper. We've done this diet and offered it. Why is the cow not responding how I want? Well, have I been accurate around utilisation? So there's what we know we need to get down the throat, and then there's what we need to be able to offer. At the end of the day, these figures will change depending on whether, how the feed is fed, but as sort of industry ballpark ones to work with, then yeah, a pasture good utilisation is around 85%. Remember, they're walking some in, they're lying on some, they're peeing on it, they're pooing on it. And bad weather, that can be as low as 70, if not even lower, of pasture utilisation. So hence why we sometimes open them up a bit more to get the same, or we pull an extra pull on the in-shed feeding or something. Feed pad usually pretty good, but sometimes not as good as what we think. So it can be, 10% wastage out there. You get bits blowing away, you get the feed face of where you're going, and then cows dropping it on the feed pad as well. In-shed feeding usually pretty good, so around 95% is what we'll try and work on. And then you've got things like maize silage in the paddock, really weather determined, and how low how well they can lick it off, or what gets lost in the pasture. So anywhere around that sort of 70 to 85% depending, and grass silage sort of similar. So just be mindful of the weather and the paddock conditions. What might an example look like? Well, if we're trying to get, just to keep this simple, 17 kilos of grass down their throat, we actually need to offer 20 at 85%. So if we're going to do our feed break, that's what we're needing to offer. So I always like to think, it was actually sort of Charlotte that we had a good chat around diets once. There's a diet we put on paper and we write down. There's the diet that we put in front of the cow. So we've done all this utilisation stuff, we've factored all that in, we've got what we need to offer her. But then there's the one that she actually eats. So just bear in mind that variability in a herd. They get used to routine. You'll have one that goes and eats a whole lot of grass, but not quite a full allocation and shed. Another one that sits on and tries to pinch everyone else's, or eats heaps on the feed pad, and they're not so much in the paddock. So it just shows you why things happen differently. It's never going to be a uniform 100% rule for everyone. Management is as much a bigger role as what we're feeding as well. So management factors can play into how we utilize feed. Cool. Getting into a little bit of nitty-gritty stuff. So those numbers we talked about before, essentially we've put in here what we need for maintenance. I'm rolling with, just to sit nice in between the north and the south, we'll go with an example of around 1.5 kilos of milk solids current production. We're mid-February, some rolling country. She's walking a couple of Ks a day, and she's currently at a buddy conditions for 4. Aim here is to dry off around, say, 1st of May on this scenario. So we've got 74 days to gain half. I want to dry her off in a 4.5, and I'm going to bank on getting another half over the dry period. That will say your farm plan, so come up with your plan. What does that mean? It means roughly this much in gain, so we need a feed for that. So at the moment, pregnancy is negligible. We will need to bring that in later. That's around 3 months before she calves. We need to start factoring that in. At the moment, negligible. So what are we looking at? We're looking at 196 ME is what I want to try and get in. So what does that mean? Well, if my pasture was 11 ME, or if my whole diet was 11 ME, then I'll be trying to get at least around 17.8 kilos of dry matter down her throat to achieve that. Now, this is where, again, supplements, our pasture might be 10, but our supplement might be 12.5 ME. So if we can increase that energy density of the diet, then we need less feed to meet the same requirement. So up the top here, I've kept in what we were originally aiming for, to keep that #1 condition gain and that current production. What if I got into a feed shortage, just say as a common question? What if I just let the girls drop in production? I might save myself because then I have to buy less feed. Is that a more economic option right now? So is it worth buying in the supplement, or where am I at? So let's say we do decide to drop it, and we've got on hand around 15 kilos of dry matter we can get down her throat. What do we have on our farm? We have, I can get her to eat 10 kilos of pasture, but it's, dropped in a bit of ME. So some of this is lower, but, it might be 10.5. We're being generous on ourselves. I've got some maize silage. This could be a different scenario with grass silage or something, but I've got some maize silage here, so I can get in 3 of that. And then what's quite common up north would be something like a summer crop like chicory. So we've got our energy, we've got our protein, and we can get in around 15. So based on that, we're getting around 160 ME in, which this is around, it's going to support, once we take out that maintenance and walking, it's going to support a production based on energy of around 1.2 milk solids. So we've lost 0.3, and we're also getting no weight gain at the moment. So, but based on our 1.2 milk solids times by $1.29, $10.80 a cow. So that might be one option people are considering. If we go to, so that scenario was 1.2 kilos milk solids and no weight gain. So say we decide, actually, I do want to get them up, and what is it going to look like to keep 1.5 kilos of milk solids, and what is it going to look like to also get some condition in our feed for that? It's going to require about another 3 kilos of feed. So I've put a pretty hefty, so some people who have contracted feed and things, they're going to have a lot lower price than this. So I've tried to work through a bit of a scenario where, you know, we're doing $600 a ton. So a pretty good quality feed. You might even get a higher ME than that and be able to feed a little bit less. And then this $2 a day is actually based on in-shed feeding and a 10% wastage in here. So we might spend another $2 a cow a day in feed. Do bear in mind that something we can't work through in a presentation like this is your own requirements for, like, you know, what infrastructure do you have? What's the cost of running that infrastructure? That side of things you'll have to work through on your own scenario. But in a real simple step, what does this look like? So we're achieving, you know, 195.5. So we're achieving what we're wanting to do. Our 196, we're not going to lose sweat over 0.5. It cost us a couple of bucks to put this in. Landed on farm at 60 cents a kilo of dry matter, good quality blend. We've got 1.5 milk solids, $9. We've got $13.50. So we've got, you know, a bit of, we've got $2 on here. So if that was $12.80, we have around 70 cents extra a cow a day. Now that didn't seem like much, but when I did 70 cents and you times that by another 74 days in lactation and even over 200 or 300 cows, you're looking at another sort of 12, 20 grand at times. So overall, little marginal gains, still getting you more profit, but still allowing you to achieve your goal for next season. So I don't want to sacrifice next season for this season when payout's good, just that whole farm plan around that. So then we look at what that makes up, that feed blend is good. Also understand if you've got cheaper feeds on farm, so some will be grazing fodder beet in situ and a lot cheaper than 60 cents a kilo of dry matter, and you're looking at, you know, how is that to put in, or you've got more on-farm feeds and you're looking at you only need, you might buy in something else and put a kilo in, or you feed. The other scenario is you feed for this production now, knowing that your better quality grass is coming. That 60 cents or that $2 isn't what's going to be fed every day if you suddenly get some better quality grass on farm. So then you've kept the cows at a really nice level of production. Inputs are going to get lower financially, and you've got the more marginal gain later in lactation as well. So yeah, thinking about all that part on farm and what that means you can achieve. It's never a talk from me if I don't mention water, so super passionate. At the end of the day, if a cow doesn't maximize her water intake, she will not maximize her feed intake. You see it quite commonly on days where this was a genuine leaky pipe scenario, but just made for a good photo. So that's all been repaired. The other thing that I found quite striking about this photo, we'll see a lot of these girls in the front, you know, really nice condition. We've got a nice layer over the long ribs. Spines are quite flat, nice rounding over the hips. So this was taken early January. So, you know, some girls looking really good, but these will all be the dominant bossy ones who take control of the trough. So what's even happening for our submissive younger cows in the background? They're even getting even less. So just bear in mind water flow, access to troughs, that sort of thing. Even if it fills up, the other girls didn't get a chance. So yeah, they do even worse, and then they will lose more condition. So really having a look at that clean water. Cows are fussy. We've got the extra challenge up north of facial eczema, so a lot of water medication does occur through water. So just bearing in mind that flavour. Quite commonly feedback you get is milk production drops when people start zinc. Their water intakes drop, they notice the flow dropping. So what caramello, grapple, other products, I know there's other zinc products out there with flavourings in them. Just yeah, doing our best to maximise that water intake that we can. We've talked about food again. I like to look at the whole farm, so there's no silver bullet here, team. So we've ticked off water, we've got the right balance of feed. Now we're prepping them well and supporting that cow from her mineral status. Calcium, lime flour, often later in the season we don't do it. the cow will start to, especially as the further pregnant she gets, will start to want to pay back her bank. So we borrowed it at calving, we mined her for a bit of calcium. Now we've got to build her back up around that cow health and longevity to keep her in our herd. So I would recommend lime flour or calcium supplementation all year round. It's a lot lower later lactation. So, ballpark, a lot of farms will probably sit around 60, 80 grams. But those who are feeding low calcium feeds, so that is grains and maize silage, especially when you're feeding a lot of maize silage, you're going to need a lot more lime flour in there to support that cow. Mag, no store in the body for magnesium in the cow, so she needs it every day. It's going to come from her feed or from supplement. Magnesium all your way through. For those who might be Bay of Plenty and further northland on the presentation, kikuyu can have really high potassium levels, and potassium competes with our magnesium, and we've just got to make sure that we don't get some late lactation milk fever or grass staggers going on either. Everywhere's hot at the moment, so we have an increased requirement for sodium. Salt's probably the easiest thing in regards to, you can just have a tub and a few drums as they go in and out of the shed to have a free access to. Just have lots of fresh, clean water whenever we're supplying salt. Really important for them to be able to manage that. And then we have phosphorus as well. So up north, maize silage feeding needs phosphorus, and then down south we have our crops like fodder beet. We've got to start to pre-plan that phosphorus as well. Trace minerals, super important now and coming in the next month or two, is a really good time to start doing our routine end of lactation trace mineral blood testing. So testing for B12 or cobalt, copper and selenium. So copper really is liver is best, and if I was to do it once a year, I'd be doing it pre-winter every year on my herd. This can be done on cull cows sent to the works. Ask your vet for a form, and they can get that one and do at least 5, or you can do liver biopsies on farm as well. We don't routinely test for iodine and zinc commonly, but just understanding that there is a requirement for them all year round in your normal trace mineral package. So have you got it going in? What is your trace mineral package? Just have a look around what you're supplying. Anyone doing facial eczema will have zinc well and truly looked after for now, so don't panic about that, but you will want to think about it once you finish facial eczema season. Cows still have a requirement, a lot smaller, but they still have a trace mineral requirement for zinc. There's a few cherries on top, so we really want to bake our cake first. You'll hear that a lot from me, but we want to make sure that we've got those building blocks. So we're meeting energy, we're meeting nutrients, and all our minerals. If the cow or the farm system's in place, then there are a few other additives that can definitely be added. When you ask for anything, there's lots of different additives on the market team. When you ask and people start to come, just ask for some data and some science. There's some really well researched ones, and then there's others that may be a bit more feel good or don't have as much research. So have a look at those. Some of the common ones talked about, like Levocel, as a yeast, rumen specific live yeast. Lots of research on that one around rumen efficiency, and heat stress and increasing some fibre digestion, as well as then even in spring helping with rumen pH. So that one's got a lot of data. There is bypass fats. So one of the benefits over summer of fats can often be that it's a non-heat producing source of energy. So again, if we've got as much of the other feeds as we can in, and there's, we can't physically get any more in, bypass fats can be an easy way just to get a bit more energy into that girl. And then there's things like antioxidants, and one really interesting one is mallow feed, that when we've got heat stress and things running around the body, really helps in regards to somatic cell count is a big one, and their overall cow health. So lots of different ones out there. That's a real quick one, just letting you know that there is those options. And to wrap it all up, is the future of our herd. So don't forget about them. So, good heifer management is all about increasing profitability on farm. So getting increased production from them, not only just in their first lactation, but in their lifetime production. Reducing how much culling and wastage. The biggest area of wastage in New Zealand is our rising 3-year-olds, or, our first calf is not getting pregnant again. So if we can set them up better, we'll have less wastage on farm, better repro, fewer replacements, and maximising that genetic potential. They are often, some of them are raised on farm, others are often sent away at grazing, so they can often be forgotten. But we really want to be regularly weighing our young stock. The younger they are, the more protein or muscle and skeleton. So skeletal growth is protein growth as well. We need a collagen type base for skeleton. So you need protein in there and a higher requirement when they're younger to build that frame. The body works by having a nice balance of fat and protein on it. That's how the systems work better around that liver health and everything like that we know is the real engine of the cow. Rising 1-year-olds also have a smaller rumen, so that capacity can be reached sooner, which means we need the better quality feed in there so that they can have a faster passage of feed and get more in to really reach their potential. Those 2-year-olds coming up soon, they're growing a calf as well as growing themselves. And the better growing they are when they come in, there's more energy for production and less for growth. They compete better. What's possible is you walk on some farms and you've really got to start to really look hard to try and pick out the 2-year-old or the first calver. You can eventually pick them out, sort of thing, but they're pretty much matching in stature the mature cows on farm as well. So definitely a challenge to set yourselves and definitely achievable out there. It's just with our short timing from obviously them being born to getting them back in calf for our requirements, that really that growth needs to be a focus with regular weighing all the time. We just can't let our finger off the pulse on that one. Cool. So that there wraps myself up around sort of some of those strategies and what feeds and why we would look at feeds and a bit of return on investment.